Welcome to episode 2 of the At the Pylon podcast. A lot to talk about on today's episode following the Pats season opener this past Sunday. While the Patriots lost, Pats fans should be rejoicing at the new team that we saw this past Sunday. I'm going to have a full game recap coming up ahead. Then we're going to bring in our analyst Chandler bets for the Pylon Cam segment. This week we're going to scope in on the Patriots offense, giving each offensive position a letter grade on the report card. And finally, we'll take a look ahead to the Pats' upcoming Sunday Night Football game against the Miami Dolphins. All that and more on the At the Pylon podcast. And welcome to the At the Pylon podcast. This is episode 2. My name is Antonakas, and oh boy, what a game we have to talk about this week. Patriots versus Eagles in the New England Patriots season opener this past Sunday. Pats unfortunately came up short, 25-20, but they made a huge statement in this game, in my opinion. Totally new team that we saw on the field compared to last year, but we're going to take a full dive into it throughout this episode. Let's not waste any time. Let's dive right into the game. So, the first thing I want to touch on is that first quarter for the New England Patriots, because this was really one of the biggest turning points of this game, considering what we got after this first quarter. But going into this game and seeing the Patriots like this for the first time this year was definitely concerning, to say the least. And a lot would argue that the rabbit hole of issues that the Patriots fell in this first quarter is what ended up killing the Patriots and their chances of winning this game against the Eagles. So let's just take a dive into it. First quarter did not start off great. The Eagles got the ball to start things off immediately. Huge play for the Patriots. Jalen Hurts mishandles a snap. It was pouring throughout the first quarter, so obviously weather conditions weren't on Hurts' side here, but he loses the snap. Patriots recover the fumble, but the defense ends up costing us there. It gets called back for a flag. Luckily, they were able to make it up to themselves because they only held the Philadelphia Eagles to a field goal. Eagles go ahead 3-0 on their first possession of the game. Now, this first offensive drive is where we begin to see problems for the New England Patriots. Now, off these first couple plays, now, you got to think about it. This is the first time that we're seeing our starting offense play in the regular season in complete full-on form. Now, off these first couple of plays, I was, getting comfortable. I was getting happy with what I was seeing. We had that creative pitch play that Bill O'Brien drew up to Ezekiel Elliott for a pretty big gain. Mac Jones and the offense seemed to be starting to move down the field. And then war flashbacks to 2022. Mac Jones throws a ball too high for Kendrick Bourne, slips right through his hands thanks to the rain, and it's a pick six for Darius Slay and the Philadelphia Eagles. They go up 10-0. And that was not it. Patriots, you think, are going to take the ball back, drive down the field. They got to redeem themselves here. This is a new team. This is a new offense. No. Ezekiel Elliott takes the handoff. It was a pass. A little bit high for him, but he ends up controlling it with one hand. Gets possession, fumbles the ball. Eagles get it right back, and they have possession once again. And things didn't end there for New England in terms of negatives. Duggar ends up getting a hold on 3rd and 12. That keeps the Eagles on the field, giving them a first down, and that allows them to score another touchdown. Patriots go down 16-0 in the first quarter, and from a Patriots fan perspective, as well as from an analytical perspective, this was not what I was expecting, but sadly, it's what I was fearing to get from the New England Patriots in this home opener. Now, I went into last week's prediction, my 27-24 prediction that I made with Chandler last week, was very much based on the fact that the Patriots were going to redeem themselves with Bill O'Brien at the helm of this offense. Now, in these first 10 minutes alone, we saw just so many similarities to last year. We saw the deflection pick six. I feel like we had so many of those last year. And of course, last year, I was making the argument that's not Mac's fault. It was a deflection. It was a lucky interception, some would say. And sure, you can apply that in this case there too, but the fact of the matter is, Jones was dealing with this all of last year, and the amount of times that he's starting to make these small mistakes was just adding up to the point where I was like, you know what? That little bit of an overthrow that may have been catchable when it's not in the rain, it doesn't matter. It's still an overthrow, and it still led to an interception. So that to me was just really what got the gears grinding on inside of my head, at least. But then followed up immediately by the Ezekiel Elliott fumble. The poor guy, I mean, his first game with the Pats, and luckily he didn't get slammed into the doghouse. But then again, is he going to even be able to get slammed into the doghouse here? Because the fact of the matter is, he's like one of 3 running backs. We ended up calling up Ty Montgomery from the practice squad for this game, thank God. I was worried about the running back depth from last year, but we can't throw this guy in the doghouse. We can't have Ty Montgomery at running back too. But regardless, these mistakes were all things that we were seeing last year. Silly penalties, silly mistakes, pivotal turnovers twice in the first quarter. And at the end of the first, the Patriots trail 16-0. This was their biggest first quarter deficit since 2013 against the Denver Broncos. And it was just a terrible first quarter. And going into the second, I personally didn't expect things to get much better. I was all prepared for the disaster that was going to unfold for the Patriots, but luckily, they proved me wrong. So let's start diving into some of the positives that we actually saw from New England in this first game. So first things first, their defense just had an incredible game, peak performance, and I'd say based off this performance today against the reigning NFC champions, that this is the most complete defense that the New England Patriots have had since Tom Brady left. And that's saying something because last year, the defense carried this team to 8 wins when their offense was bottom barrel of the league. Their defense was very good last year. And in 2021, you could say that throughout points of that season, it was very good as well. It did start to crumble towards the end of the year in terms of slow pass rush and stuff like that, but it was still a good defense. And since then, New England, this defense just blows all those others out of the water. The secondary was just incredible. Christian Gonzalez, his debut game with the squad, an extremely impressive performance from him. 5 tackles, 2 assists, 1 tackle for loss, 1 pass defended. He was matching up against Brown and Devonta Smith all game, and he was locking them up pretty well. Those are 2 very elite wide receivers. They just took the Philadelphia Eagles to the Super Bowl last year. Of course they're going to be. So Gonzalez was able to hold his own against those 2, and the secondary just looked great. Let's move to Miles Bryant. Last week, I was saying that Bryant should not be the cornerback 3 or 4 on this team. I was hoping Jack Jones would be ready to slot in. Unfortunately, he ended up on the injury report at the end of last week. Didn't play in this game. And Miles Bryant, I just want to officially apologize because you had a very solid game this past week. 5 tackles and assists. He had that extremely good hit in the third quarter. That hit stick was incredible. I mean, it just riled up the crowd. It riled up the whole defense. And it was just an incredible hit on Miles Bryant's part. It was a clean one, too. So just a great game by Miles Bryant. I think debatably one of the best games of his Patriots career. And I mean, I guess that's not saying that much, but it was just a great game from him. Then we move to the safeties. D-Mac obviously retiring. Some people were concerned about the safety core. Personally, I had no concerns because of this guy, Jabril Peppers, who had an outstanding game. Now, when we signed him last year, I was very much on the train of this guy is good. Like, I hope he shifts into the lineup and gets as many opportunities as possible because I just love him. And we got him at a great price last year. We ended up giving him an extension this offseason. Just had an incredible year last year in the very limited role that he had because our safeties room was so deep. This year with D-Mac retiring, he kind of elevates himself up a little bit more, getting more reps. He had that forced fumble on Jalen Hurts that really gave the Patriots a chance to get back into this game. He had 1 PD, 3 tackles, 3 assists, shifted into more of an involved role, like I said. And also you have Adrian Phillips, who has been a stud for the Pats for the past couple of years. We saw him really rotating around in the backfield. He was making his versatility shine in this game. Had an incredible game for himself as well. The secondary just as a whole was incredible. And we haven't even touched on the pass rush yet. Oh, just an incredible game from the front 7. Matt Judon, Josh Uche, 2 superstars that just continued to prevail in this one. They each had a sack in this game. Really applied the pressure on Jalen Hurts, who's not only a scrambling quarterback, but has one of the best offensive lines in front of him in the NFL. So Patriots defense was able to give him a run for his money there, and didn't even touch on this yet, kind of moving back to the secondary, but I threw it in here in the pass rush category because Christian Gonzalez had an incredible sack. That was the Patriots' third sack of the day. Gonzalez just looped right around from the bottom of our screen, got the hit on Hurts. Just an incredible play from a Patriots perspective. And the defense just played their hearts out, and they were playing against one of the best offenses in the league, and they performed. And honestly, it's not super surprising because I really thought that the Patriots defense was going to be the best it's been this year, but I was just, a little bit taken aback by the fact that they were just playing so well. It seemed like they were just putting the Eagles out of pace, and some could argue that, sure, the Eagles did seem to be struggling offensively in this game. They didn't seem to have their feet under themselves, but you can't take away credit from the Patriots defense. They gave them a run for their money. Now, Chandler and I were talking last week about this magic number. 24 points was the magic number for the Patriots defense. They couldn't allow Philadelphia to score over 24 points if we thought they were going to get the win here. I predicted 27-24, the final for the Patriots, and Chandler picked 20-31 in favor of the Eagles. So it ended up being that the Patriots weren't able to hold the Eagles to 24 points. They gave up one more, giving up 25 points in this game. Now, if they were below 24, technically, if we were going to look at it from a score standpoint, that would have set them back to 22 because of that field goal. If the Patriots were able to hold them there, they would have had possession in that last drive. They could have just held on to the ball, wasted the clock, kicked a field goal, and they could have won that game. So I guess considering the Patriots were right, Chandler and I at least were right about the Pats in this circumstance, not being able to give up more than 24 points, they could have gotten the win. But unfortunately for the Pats, they give up 1 point shy of getting that margin, and I think that was a big contributing factor in why they lost this game. But although the defense wasn't super surprising because we kind of expected it to be as good as it was, although they did overperform a little bit, the offense is really the big point to talk about here today. This new offense just shined after that first quarter that was about as big of a disaster as you could get from this offensive group, considering what everybody was talking about in the preseason and what happened last year. It was like, oh, great, the Pats are back to 2022. It's like Matt Patricia never left. Maybe Mac Jones is the problem. That's what at least I was thinking in the first quarter. But second, third, and fourth quarter, this team just totally turned it around. It all starts with the offensive coaching. Like I said last year, Matt Patricia was the vocal point at the problems for the New England Patriots offense. I'm a big Mac Jones fan. I think that he can be this team's quarterback if he continues to grow the way that he has been, and he proved that he did that in this regular season opener. But it all starts at the offensive coaching. Bill O'Brien shifts in, and we just see a totally new involvement of offensive players. Guys like Kendrick Bourne, he was stuck in Matt Patricia's doghouse all last season. I think he missed one team meeting in the preseason, I should say. And he was just in the doghouse all year, not getting involved in the offense whatsoever. Then you move to the tight ends. Hunter Henry, last year we had Jonnu Smith. Good thing he's gone now. But regardless, we couldn't work our tight ends into the offense. Matt Patricia just couldn't call plays centered around the tight ends. This game just totally proved different as Henry was a huge factor. Mike Gesicki as well having a great game. We're going to get into their stats a little bit later when we give the offensive report cards. Chandler and I, we're going to bring him in for that segment later. But just the offensive, from an offensive coaching standpoint, involving guys like that in the offense, spreading the ball around. 7 different players were able to record receptions for the Patriots in this game. That shows you that the weapons group, like I was saying, maybe isn't the problem for this group, because the fact is, all these guys are able to make plays. Bourne 2 touchdowns. Henry had a touchdown. And everybody was recording receptions and getting yards after the catch. They were all making solid grabs. Even our rookie wide receivers, they were able to slot in for guys that we lost last year. And granted in this game as well due to the injury report. And the weapons problem doesn't seem to be the big problem with this team, as our guys proved that they could hold their own. But Mac Jones is the big vocal point here. Last year, everybody was divided on the fact, Bailey Zappi should take over these 4 games, blah, blah, blah. I was never on that ship. Going into this season, I thought Mac Jones was going to vastly improve, as I said, with that change in the offensive coaching, and it's clear that he did. He was showing war flashbacks, as I said, in 2022 in that first quarter, but he was able to prevail throughout the rest of the game. One thing that I noticed, apart from his stats, we'll just run through them quick. He went 35 for 54. That's a 65% completion rate. Over 300 yards with 316 yards. Threw 3 touchdowns, and then he had that one kind of shaky interception in the first quarter off the hands of Kendrick Bourne. The big thing I noticed outside of actual red zone completions and being able to capitalize on drives that end up in the red zone was Mac Jones's pocket presence. Especially with this offensive line that had 2 rookies starting this game with Cole Strange and Mike Onwenu both out. Mac Jones was just able to completely set himself in the pocket. He had great footwork. He was able to stay confident in the pocket, hold himself in there. And despite it was kind of getting to him in the first quarter, we saw he was scrambling around. He couldn't set his feet, and that was leading to why he was rushing the ball out so much. He just couldn't stay poised in the pocket. He just kept rushing the play because he was so concerned with the pass rush. Once he was able to lock himself down and kind of stay poised in that pocket, we just saw a totally different player. And that proved to be just an effective point for the New England Patriots. Now, after the game, obviously, Pats came up short. Jones put the blame on himself. He said, quote, "I really didn't throw any good passes on the first drive." And then later he says, "I put it on myself." Some analysts were saying that it was a pretty dramatic, I guess is the right word, a pretty dramatic vocal point there by Jones, the way he put the blame on himself. Matt Judon ended up going after the game as well and kind of talking about it, saying that, that's our quarterback, that's how quarterbacks are, and that's how they should be after games, accountable for things like that. But they're not too worried about it. So Mac Jones, obviously, he has this dog mentality. He wants to keep getting better, but some would say that he had a great game this game, and I believe he did as well. Now, the last point that we're going to move into is the offensive line. This thing was my biggest concern, at least last week heading into this game, because of the fact that we had so many guys missing. As I said, Riley Reif injured. Cole Strange was injured. Mike Onwenu out. All these guys not able to shift in. We had Antonio Mafi, Calvin Anderson, 2 rookies playing in this game, and they played above average. We saw in that first quarter they were getting shoved against there, and it was a bit of a problem for New England, especially in that first quarter. But the fact of the matter is they were able to hold their own against a top 5, if not top 3, front 7 in the NFL, in the Philadelphia Eagles front 7, former reigning NFC champions. So although I believe that they had, some flaws in that first quarter that was a key factor in what dug the Patriots in such a deep rabbit hole in terms of going down 16-0, there were a lot of positives to gain. Mafi and Anderson, both viable backup options on this offensive line. God forbid Strange and Onwenu work their way back. They can't, whether they're injured or what, we don't know. But the fact of the matter is, both of those guys proved themselves here today against a top team in the NFL. But another vocal point that I'll say before we close out here and move to the Pylon cam is Trent Brown. I had a lot to say about Trent Brown last year. I had a lot to say about Trent Brown in the preseason with his constant penalties. No flags for Brown today, and he did a great job holding his own on the outside there for this Patriots offensive line. So since his return to New England, I'd say that this is probably one of Trent Brown's best games as a New England Patriot. So definitely a promising foot forward there for Trent Brown, as he's going to be a big impact on this Patriots offense. But with that, we're going to move ahead to the Pylon segment, the Pylon cam. We're going to bring in our analyst, Chandler Betts, and we're going to throw together a report card for the Patriots offense. Let's dive right into it. All right, everybody, welcome to the At the Pylon special segment called the Pylon Cam. We're joined by our analyst, Chandler Betts. Chandler, good to have you back this week.
Thanks for having me, Nick.
So we're going to start off, Chandler, in this special segment. We're going to be bringing the viewers a report card for all of the offensive positions, a totally different week for the offense this week from what we saw last year. So we're going to go through each offensive position, give them a letter grade on a scale of A to F. And we'll start with you, Chandler. Let's start with Mac Jones. What'd you give him as a grade at the quarterback position?
Okay. So I was a little bit more negative than many people were towards Mac going into the game. I gave Mac a B plus for his performance. I feel like that's probably pretty middle of the road for what most people said. I was obviously disappointed by the first quarter, but then he went 10 for 10 going into the half, came out of it looking great, drove us down multiple times, threw a lot of really good hash balls, like right on the hash, kind of finding those little seams in a cover two or a cover three even. He was solid. I think that he is a quarterback right now. If you put a gun to my head, somebody who's not necessarily going to win you a Super Bowl, but he's a quarterback that you can win a Super Bowl with. And that was something that I had never even come close to saying last year. So B plus for me. What about you, Nick?
I went a little bit higher than you. I went with the A minus ranking, but I obviously was a little bit higher on Mac last year than you were, and going into this year as well. I was pretty high on Mac. Had big expectations for him going into this year. Obviously in the game he looked great. 35 for 54, as I talked about at the beginning of the episode. 316 yards, 3 touchdowns, only that one interception, which I thought was a little bit of a fluke. With the
Yeah,
although
we can talk about that a little, actually, if
yeah,
you don't mind.
yeah, go for
So,
it.
watching it immediately, I'm in my emotions when I watch the game. I try to watch it play once as a fan and once as, an objective participant.
Yeah.
And at first, I'm like, oh, that wasn't his fault. It kind of was. It was very far behind Kendrick Bourne.
It's a
It
little bit
wasn't a great throw.
overthrown too.
Yeah, and it didn't have as much velocity as it needed to, which is kind of a trend that I saw throughout the day, and that's something that I've always seen with Mac, even in college. His processing speed was really impressive once Bill O'Brien got in his ear. Something happened at halftime. Something happened probably about midway through the second quarter, where that really changed for him, and I was very impressed from that point. Looking off defenders, really playing the linebackers like a real proper NFL quarterback should. And I was very impressed by that. But there was still every once in a while a throw that I was like, oh, that's too wobbly. That's too slow. That's into triple coverage. What are we doing here, Mac? And you got lucky. There were a couple throws that I thought could have been turnover worthy. I'm not sure what the advanced stats are actually going to say. I haven't looked at those yet. But that really dragged me down from, I was thinking an A minus based on that second half. And also, I don't know if you guys saw in his press conference at the end, took pretty much full responsibility for the loss. I don't think that's
Yeah,
fair.
I talked about that actually
Yes.
earlier.
Yeah, and he was saying that he let the defense down. I don't know if that's quite the case, but he did have two chances to lead a game-winning drive. I don't think you can justifiably give someone a grade involving an A when you have those chances and you didn't capitalize on it.
That's fair, but I would say that I think that little post game barrage by Mac to the media was a little bit dramatic, is what I called it.
I agree. I agree.
But despite that, I think part of my A minus ranking sat with the fact that it was raining really hard in the first quarter. He was dealing with a new offensive line with two rookies starting, and the fact of the matter was they were giving up a good amount of pressure in that first quarter. Although we didn't see any
Yes.
sacks, it was just like Mac just seemed like so out of touch with the offensive line. He was scrambling around in the pocket. He couldn't set his feet. And I think that's part of what led to that poor play. But as we saw later in the game, he cleaned up pretty nicely, had a great game. And I think
Yeah.
the season ahead for Mac is bright. So I went the A minus.
I agree. And one last thing for me, his pocket mobility was so impressive during that
Yeah.
game. He kept climbing the pocket. When we get to the offensive line, I'll talk more about this. But he received a lot of pressure, even when he was really in his bag towards the end. And he was successfully climbing, he was successfully evading. He's obviously not a scrambling quarterback, but he was scrambling. He wasn't running, he was scrambling. There's a key difference there. A lot of people don't understand. But he was manipulating the pocket. He understood that he had two rookie guards who just last week I was like, we're not gonna really see them, so I'm not gonna even talk about them last week. But so we did, and Jordan Davis did have his day. But he was very impressive in his mobility. Unfortunate on that hole in that 2-point conversion because that was a very nice run. But yeah, that's just one more thing that I wanted to really give Matt credit for because I haven't in the past.
Yeah, we'll talk more about the offensive line later, but let's move to the wide receivers next. What'd you give them on a letter scale?
Okay, I gave him a C. I didn't like their performance. Specifically, I did not like Juju's performance. When I was looking at the snap counts at the end, I have them in front of me right now. Juju Smith-Schuster only played 54% of snaps. For someone who was supposed to be the revolutionary part of our offense, that is very not good. Kayshon Boutte, who just last week I was like, really high potential, won't play a lot. 69% of the snaps. That's 12 more snaps than Juju got, which is a huge deal with that offense. The only people that had full snaps were the entire offensive line, which is very impressive based on a fatigue thing, and Mac. Next up, we had Kendrick Bourne, who I actually wrote in my notes specifically. He gets an A-. Everyone else did not love their performance. Boutte loved that he was out there, loved that he stretched the defense. I feel as though his performance didn't show up on the stat sheet, but allowed Hunter Henry to have a really good day by running a lot of clearing routes to open up the middle of the field there. He really gave Reed Blankenship safety for the Eagles a really tough day. And he stepped up to the plate. He had that one really nice pass breakup. Reed Blankenship did, but Boutte really gave him a tough day. So I give him credit for that. Demario Davis played a lot of snaps. The rookie out of Liberty, another very impressive performance. But all in all, I didn't feel like the offense should be, or the wide receivers should be getting anything above a C.
Now, actually, I was in the same boat, at least from the perspective that Bourne was definitely the star of the show for this wide receiver room on Sunday. 6 receptions, 64 yards, 2 touchdowns. The guy was all over the field at all times. But with that in mind, I gave the wide receiver room a B just because of that heavy weight from Bourne on front. Demario Douglas, like you said, had a great game. 4 for 40. I thought he played pretty well. And as you said, although Boutte had no receptions, I guess technically he had some catches, although they didn't count with the whole toe drag drama that we had coming out of that game. But regardless, he's still a rookie. Both of those guys for the position that they were slotted in here against one of the best defenses in the NFL, I keep saying. So
yes,
they played well. And although Juju, he was disappointing, the snap count was something that I didn't really think about. So I'm glad you brought that up. Only 53% of snaps at the money that he's making is not something that we want to see.
Yes.
But from the amount he was in, he had 4 receptions, 33 yards. He did have that really bad drop. But other than that, I thought he played all right for his first game of the Patriots offense with the whole drama surrounding his knee from last week.
Yes.
Maybe he was going a little bit gingerly on it, but we don't know. But regardless, I think that it was a pretty good day for the wide receiver room. Bourne was obviously there elevating the crew to a B. Without him, I think they would have been in the lower C range, kind of similar to what you said, but I'll give him a B. But
I'm very curious how Devontae Parker is going to affect the snap count next week. Because
if he's back in, that is. Do you think he'll play?
True. I'm really not sure. I haven't done enough checking in on his actual what the IR said for him.
Yeah.
But
I'm pretty sure it was an ankle or I'm not going to say anything because I'm probably wrong, but some sort of injury.
But in terms of schematically, he would be taking snaps from Boutte. And I wonder then if we're going to see Demario Douglas take more snaps from Juju, because we have very specific archetypes of players right now. And we have the only one that is the one and only is Bourne. And that's a good position to be in because I think that he is right now our most skilled wide receiver, which is crazy that we didn't use him at all last year. But that's a whole nother conversation when we get to Bill O'Brien. But
God help us.
yeah, we'll see. Yeah, we'll see how next week and how a fully healthy Patriots roster will actually affect snap counts. But we just didn't get quite enough production from the wide receivers for me to say anything above a C. I was vacillating between a C and a C plus for a lot of the time, but I couldn't really justify giving them anything higher.
That's definitely fair, but we'll keep moving on here. Let's go to the running backs. Chandler, what's your take?
Okay, I'm not saying this was necessarily the running back's fault. I gave him a C-. They were really strong in the pass game. Zeke had that fumble, but he did look a lot better than I was expecting. Ramondre picked up a couple nice runs just by scheming, but he was really effective in the screen game. I wrote here the pass game is the only reason this isn't a D. I was disappointed with that, and I think that's mostly has to do with the interior offensive line. But again, we'll get to that later. C- for me.
I actually had the same score as you, Chandler. I had a C minus. And at the
Nice.
top of my notes for Ramondre Stevenson, last week we were talking about 5-star players, and I wrote
Absolutely
5
not.
star player who?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Because
Yeah.
this guy just totally disappeared. I get it now.
He had the
He
flu.
wasn't. He wasn't 100%. He had that. They were calling it, I think, a stomach bug on air, but
Yeah.
something in that field of illness.
Yeah.
But the first half, he was just totally asleep.
Mm-hmm.
Like nothing on that regard. We were going to Zeke more than Ramondre, and I thought
Yeah.
part of it had to do with the fact that he wasn't 100%. And like you
Yeah.
said, the screen passes aspect of this is really what prevents this from being a failing grade for me, because from a rushing standpoint, Mondre had 12 carries for 25 yards, 2.1 average yards per carry, and Zeke 7 carries, 29 yards, 4.1 yards per carry. That was just completely disappointing from a team that we thought was extremely strong in the running game. Now,
Yeah.
I didn't have high expectations for Zeke, kind of similar to you. So from that standpoint, it makes some sort of sense that he didn't play to like his true potential, I guess. But I wouldn't say that he really has much more potential beyond this role that he's already in. But
Mm-hmm.
regardless, I give the running back room a C minus. It was disappointing to say the least. But yeah, I guess we'll move on here to tight ends. Chandler, what's your take?
Tight ends. I give my tight ends a B. I liked their performance. Hunter Henry had that incredible catch, that one-hander. That was lovely. And Gesicki just looked solid. I really didn't have any complaints about them. And Hunter Henry was, for a lot of the game, our most effective pass catcher, and most consistent across the middle of the field. So I gave him the B. I didn't really have that much to say about it. They don't really, the tight ends that we have right now, Hunter Henry and Gesicki, aren't really big blocking guys. So yeah, B, pretty simple, pretty cut and dry for me.
For me, actually, I went much higher than that. I gave the tight end room an A minus.
Really interesting.
I thought just Hunter Henry alone had an outstanding game.
He did.
5 catches, 56 yards. He had that great touchdown. He had that great clutch one-handed catch you were talking about.
Yep.
The one kind of flaw for them for me was the drop that Henry had. I know the ball was a little bit underthrown, but that was still a catchable ball. He had to make that catch. But I actually disagree from you from the fact I thought Henry had a great game blocking.
He had a good game blocking, but that's not what he's known for, is more so what I meant.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. But I think from the tight end group that we have, from a blocking standpoint, I thought they played well and kind of filled in a little bit in terms of the lack of talent we had at offensive line in this one because of the injuries. But
Yeah.
Gesicki also not as much on the stat sheet, 3 catches, 36 yards, but the tight end involvement in the offense is what really made the difference for me. And we'll get
Yes.
into that a little bit more when we talk about Bill O'Brien. But
Yeah, I think I'm just putting the weight on their success slightly differently than you are.
that's fair. That's
Maybe.
fair.
We'll see.
I think the playmaking abilities, at least from Hunter Henry, were enough to boost that up to an A minus. But I can see your B ranking any day because
Yeah.
it seems that you're shifting the praise for that over to Bill O'Brien, which I think is totally justified.
Yeah, we'll see when we get to that one.
But yeah, we'll keep moving here. Offensive line, Chandler, what'd you give him for a score?
This feels weird to say, but I gave them a D. Like I
Oh,
said I had 3 different ones on here. I originally had him at a C plus, then I had him at a C minus, then I moved him down to a D. Because if we look at again, I didn't see the actual like numbers for it because I don't think they've been released yet, but the time between drop back and release was very short, which is good. And I actually mentioned that in my keys last week that we needed to play a quick game. Tunnel screens, quick across the middle, stuff like that. That was really effective. The one sack is very misleading because of the amount of pressures. Like I said earlier with Mac, he had so much pocket mobility and he was really impressive. that he masked pretty much every issue we had with that offensive line. And yes, I know that the interior defensive line that we were going against is probably the best in the league, probably the most dominant in the league, maybe other than the 49ers. We'll see how that goes with the later in the season. But a D, and it's kind of an unfair D because we were missing two of our five starters. Especially the interior offensive line is important for us because Ramondre is not a fast running back. He needs to be running through gaps. He's not a stretch running back. He is an inside the tackles running back. And when the guys inside your tackles are playing their first football game at the NFL level, you're going to have some issues.
Now, I definitely understand what you're saying there. I'm a little bit shocked by the D because originally my idea of this flaw for the Patriots offense, their Achilles heel almost, was the offensive line. I thought that they affected Mac's play greatly, and a lot of those inaccuracies, like I was talking about before, was because of the amount of pressure he was facing and trying to get the ball off as fast as he possibly could. In saying that, though, considering the circumstances that this line was in, two starters missing, top three front seven in the league, in my opinion, in the Philadelphia Eagles on the other side of the ball, I gave him a B minus.
Yeah, I think that we're just putting different weight on different things. Like I'm
Yeah.
not in the slack that you are. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And also, again, I'm just putting weight on the success of the offense in one person, basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, continue to explain why you're a B. Because even considering that, I think that if we were to go on the same what you're saying, I think the highest I would go is a C plus.
Yeah, like I was very much on the edge of like B minus C plus type of ranking. But mainly my praise kind of stands, I guess, at Trent Brown, who I was dissing a lot last week, but I thought he had a great game.
When I was high on last week,
No penalties, and from a standpoint of the offensive line, they didn't really have that many collective flags. I think it was just one to Mafi.
That's true. Yes, they really didn't have that many flags because they kind of just
that was my main issue with the offensive line, like from last year. One of the top two, obviously, being the amount that they were affecting Mac's gameplay and the flags. So canceling that out was just a total like flip around on the offensive side of the ball. Now, does that deserve praise necessarily? No, because you should be playing disciplined football if you're on an NFL team. If you're constantly getting penalties,
yeah,
exactly. Now, this is where I kind of shift to the negative side a little bit. Mike Reese tweeted out this very interesting stat close to the second quarter during the game. He says, quote, as the Patriots take over at their own 29 with 9 minutes, 22 seconds remaining in the second quarter, quarterback Mac Jones has yet to attempt a pass 10 plus yards downfield. His completions were thrown an average of 0.6 yards downfield. So to me, that just screams this guy has no time to throw whatsoever.
Yeah.
But I guess I don't think it's really fair, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. So I think I'm going to move them down to a C plus. But the reason that I kind of originally went with the B minus was to give them the benefit of the doubt that they were facing one of the best front sevens in the league and they had two backup guys in. But that's not really excusable for the fact of they still kind of drastically affected the way this offense played. But I think that's a good transition point into the headmaster of this offense. We have Bill O'Brien. What would you give him on a grade scale of A to F, Chandler?
I give him an A plus plus. This man completely revolutionized. He didn't revolutionize because he's done it before, but he brought back an offense that we haven't seen in a while. I still stand by my point that we don't have a 5-star player, but we might have a 5-star play caller, somebody that can make up for that as much as possible, because even the best play caller isn't stepping on the field. They're not actually throwing the ball. They're not catching the ball. But he schemed open a lot of plays. He made everyone look so much better than they actually are, except Ramondre, but that's not really either of their fault. That's the injury bug's fault, in my opinion. He made me happy with Mac. He made me happy with Kendrick Bourne. He made me happy with Ramondre Stevenson. He made you happy with Trent Brown. This man is the Messiah right now. He can do no wrong until next week. Maybe. We'll see. He has the grace of New England in my eyes right now. If we were to go 1 to 100, he gets like a 104 from me right now.
Yeah, I'm on the same boat as you. I gave him an A. I guess I was going with college rules with no A plus, but
Yeah,
I'll give
we're
him.
going what Notre Dame. Notre Dame.
Yeah, but yeah, I gave him an A. Um, I think probably the best way to describe this offense was it just felt fresh. There was a
Yes.
huge variety in play calling that I was talking about before you joined us. There was just a vast involvement of different personnel on this offense. And I said even in quarter one, which was an extremely dark time of the game, Bill was still calling some good plays. Like on that first drive before Mac threw that pivotal interception, we had that switch up pitch to Zeke that went like
Yes.
12 yards down the sideline. I was like, wow, that was a really creative running play that like incorporates multiple players and is not just your average pitch that is going to get tackled behind the line of scrimmage, if you call it right. So I just thought he was amazing in terms of
I
play
agree.
calling. I loved the decisions to go for it on fourth down.
I loved
Um,
both of them.
I
Even though it
did
didn't
like,
work
and
out, I loved
although it
both.
didn't work out, I mean, what would a field goal really have done for us there if we were to?
I was thinking field goal, but because at that point it would have become a 2 point game. You get the ball back, then you can just go get three to win the game. A lot of people are
But
going to
we
debate that.
we costed ourselves with the magic number, the 24 rule, as you were talking about earlier. Once we
Yeah,
went above to 25
I
points,
don't like that I was right, but
and it,
I suppose.
but the only reason, the only little flack thing that I had with Bill was the kicker situation. Well, this partly goes on Bill Belichick
Yeah.
because the fact of the matter is he chose to trade Nick Folk and bring in Chad Ryland, right? Chad?
Yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
Chad Ryland. Um, I don't even remember his first name because he didn't kick
Yeah.
the ball once for a field goal. But anyway,
Yeah.
um, the decisions throughout the game to not kick a field goal from 55 yards out. I mean, I get it. It's a long field goal.
He has a
But if
long
you're
leg
gonna
though. He has a really big
yeah,
leg
and
though.
if you're gonna trade a guy like Nick Folk, and sign this rookie to take over, why are we pulling like the 2020 kicker rotation thing,
Yeah.
where we were searching for Nick Folk before that with all
Yep.
those. I forget half the guys now, but they were just horrible.
We
The
had a Guayo on the practice squad for like
Yup,
a couple of weeks. We had a Vacchio, I think his name. Uh,
yup.
all those guys. I try
Dark
my best to
time in
forget that
Patriots
that
history.
time,
Well, and I
Um,
remember on the nosebleeds, we would always be
oh
crying about that. But
no, yeah,
my thing was why not give him the nod to kick the field goal if you're going to keep him on the roster? Bill O'Brien might have a different take than Bill Belichick. That's totally fine, I guess. But not all the blame needs to go on Bill O'Brien for that. But definitely going into next week against the Dolphins,
Mhm.
I think it's something that we need to kind of figure out here. We got to see the guy kick a field goal. But
Agreed.
I think that's a good transition point. Phil Perry, I was listening to the Patriots Talk podcast this morning. Phil Perry said, quote, everything will be a win if we compare it to last season, which I think we've done a good amount of in these rankings because the fact of the matter is we weighted Mac Jones, I mean, pretty high on an A- scale, and same with the other positions, partly because of the vast improvement that they had from last year. This is all
Yeah,
we've really seen from them so far this year. So as much as it was an improvement, we need to kind of progress beyond the comparisons from last year because the fact of the matter is some of these grades are so high because we're basing it off last year, like I said. So
yeah.
what better way to look ahead than to Sunday Night Football this Sunday against the Miami Dolphins? Chandler, we got some questions for you going into this game.
Oh yeah.
First off, how much of a threat is Miami's offense compared to Philadelphia's? And do you think our defense can hold up with the Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle led wide receiver core?
Yeah, this is a horrifying offense. This is a Madden offense. This is terrifying. They have absolute track stars all across the board. Tyreek Hill ran a 4.29. Jalen Wall ran a 4.37, and their starting running back Raheem Mostert ran a 4.32. They clearly value speed so much so that even though he's injured, Devin Chain, their rookie running back, I believe he ran a 4.34. Um, they just want fast people, and they have a hyper accurate quarterback in Tua, who is currently over a. We're recording this before Monday Night Football, so we'll see how that turns out. But right now, he's over 100 yards beyond the next closest receiver in terms of passing yards, 3 tuds and an interception. And the really scary part for me, no sacks. Tua wasn't sacked once in this past game. And, we saw that Mac only got sacked once. That wasn't necessarily indicative of how the offensive line performed, but This is a good offensive line in Miami, and they haven't had that before. It's weird to say that Isaiah Wynn, who's their starting left guard, is part of a really good offensive line right now, but he is. I
God,
know.
he's
Yep, I know.
starting.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep, I
How
know
the tables have turned.
how they have
God.
turned. Yeah, so interestingly enough, though, they are incredibly fast. So for that reason, I don't think that there's going to be a team that can full out stop them this year. I think this is a really dangerous offense. But I think that we have a good chance of slowing them down a little bit because our two boundary cornerbacks, Jonathan Jones and Christian Gonzalez, actually have both run under 4.40s. Jonathan Jones was a 4.33 and Christian Gonzalez was a 4.38. And for reference, JC Jackson was a 4.46 and Gilmore was a 4.4. So we have fast corners right now, and they clearly showed that they have a motor because of the last week, two players on the defense played every snap. It was Kyle Duggar and it was Gonzo. It was Christian Gonzalez. They played every defensive snap and they looked good. That secondary, that's never been the issue for me. Jabril Peppers, we know I waxed lyrical about him last week. I love that man. Gonzalez was incredible. Jonathan Jones was really good. Miles Bryant, who I constantly give problems to, was actually very solid.
Yeah, and I talked
about that earlier too, actually.
Adrian Phillips in the few snaps that he played, he had a really big special teams impact. But in the few snaps that he played, he was covering well, even, which is something that he's not known for. I think that our secondary is very strong right now, and that is going to be interesting going against this Miami offense that had 466 passing yards last week. Interestingly enough, they didn't have many rushing yards. I don't have the numbers in front of me exactly, but I believe that Mostert was their top runner with 34, if I remember off the top of my head. And that's really interesting because if you harken back to Mike McDaniels before he was the head coach of the Miami Dolphins, he was the run game coordinator in San Francisco.
With it's Mostert, right?
With Mostert, yes, with Mostert, with a bunch of people that he's brought in. Jeff Wilson, who was there, who's no longer here, of course, but he was at the time. He's brought in a lot of production from his teams, actually with Kendrick Bourne. But it's very interesting to see how little they ran the ball, how unsuccessfully actually even they ran the ball against a team in Los Angeles Chargers that aren't really known for their run defense.
Now, kind of transitioning from our
defense to theirs, how dangerous is Miami's defense compared to this new and improved New England Patriots offense that we saw last week?
So this is really fascinating to me. I have absolutely no idea what to make of them. And I don't like saying that because I like knowing things. I have no idea what to make of this team because they have a new defensive coordinator in Vic Fangio. Last year, their defensive coordinator, whose name is completely slipping my mind right now, was.
I just remember that everybody was blaming him.
And it was kind of unfair. I'm going to be honest that they blamed him. He was a stayover from the Brian Flores era when they were super blitz heavy and super man defense heavy, and that's what they did last year. Last year, they were sixth worst in passing yards allowed per game, but they were fourth best in rushing yards allowed per game. But this time against the Chargers, who notoriously have a really strong offense all across the board, they only allowed 228 passing yards, but they allowed 234 rushing yards. That is absurd. I think Joshua Kelly, the backup running back, had almost 100 yards. Eckler had 117, again, if I remember off the top of my head. A whole lot of rushing production. And this defense, I don't know what to make of them because Fangio is, of course, a really strong, really historically strong defensive coordinator, but he's super zone oriented. And they don't have really strong corners right now because of the Jalen Ramsey injury. They have Xavier Howard, and of course, Xavier Howard's a guy. He's very good. But because of that injury, they elevated their cornerback 3 to cornerback 2, and they brought in Eli Apple as their cornerback 3. And the internet knows no bounds with that man. So if we can scheme well, I think that we can take advantage of this team, especially because we saw how effective our pass offense was this past week. So I have faith that we are able to pass on this defense that didn't allow a lot of passing yards. And as rough as our rushing attack was, their rush defense was so much worse. So yeah, that's what I've got for the defense. We can take advantage of them.
Now, I think that's a
pivotal point to kind of move into each of our keys of the game. Last week you had 5. This week I'm stealing a couple from you because I'm doing 3 and then you're doing 3. But I guess I'll start off. My first key for the Pats to get the W this week they got to stay disciplined. We can't shoot ourselves in the feet. Last week, we obviously saw that in the first quarter. And as I was saying earlier in the pod, that first quarter, I think, is what wrote the death note for the New England Patriots. They weren't able to kind of climb out of that huge hole. They were always playing from behind. So if they were able to kind of avoid at least half of those mistakes that were so brutal in that first quarter, they would have probably won that game. Second off, the run game has to come alive. And especially as you were just talking about the Dolphins' shaky run defense, if Ramondre and Zeke can really pull it together here, I think the Patriots have a true chance to win this game. They can run through other teams, as we saw last year, in an offense that was very shaky, to say the least. And with an offense that's looking a lot more well-rounded outside of the running game, they're going to need to kind of perform there with Ramondre, especially. I'm looking for him to step up this week. Finally, secondary, they got to step up to the plate, as we were talking about earlier. Waddle and Hill, possibly the best wide receiver combo in the league right now. And the secondary just is going to have to match up. Gonzalez had a great first week, locking up guys like Brown and Devonta Smith. So I do have a little bit of confidence there for that, but there can't be any errors in the secondary, and hopefully our momentum keeps up. What about yours?
I'll hop into mine. I'm going to be quick with mine because I've pretty much already said mine before, but I'm going to highlight them again here. The interior offensive line has to be cohesive, and hopefully they're going to be healthy, but they need to be cohesive so that our run game can be dominant against a good nose tackle in Christian Wilkins. They have a good run defense. Jalen Phillips, I'm more worried about in the pass rush. So we really need to take advantage of what we can do in the middle there. Like I said, Tua wasn't sacked once. We have to hit Tua. I'm never going to wish for someone to get hurt, but he just has to know that we are there. It's like when you're trying to block a field goal, even if you're not going to block it, it's known that you want to try to get at the kicker's feet so that they think they were close to having it be blocked, so that they think about something. Same thing with Tua. If he thinks that we're going to hit him, then he's going to start to be a little bit more inaccurate. He's going to start to make some errors. We've seen that he's more than willing to throw a couple picks. And then the third key, it's gone. So it's Christian Gonzalez. He is the entire key there. He is going to, I don't know which one he's going to be on, but he's going to be on one of them, probably both of them at some point. But he's going to focus more so, I think, on Tyreek. And yeah, we saw what that man can do. If he doesn't do that, last time that we faced him with Tua as the quarterback, he had 8 catches for 96 yards, and then Waddle had 4 for 69 and a tud. That's a dangerous pass offense there, and that's not even considering that Tyreek Hill got over 200 yards last week. So let's try our best to not let him do that then. If that happens, then we'll see what happens next.
I definitely agree with you there.
But with all this anticipation about keys for the game, Chandler, who do you got, Pats or Dolphins? And then what's your score?
I really wanted to take the Patriots, but I will not be taking the Patriots. I have a 30-23 win for the Miami Dolphins.
Well, I really wanted to take the
Patriots too, and I'm going to pull the trigger because I did last week. It worked out for me in terms of hoping that the offense was going to turn it around. They did. They just weren't able to get the win. But this week, I think New England responds. I'm saying 31-27 Patriots.
Oh, good game.
So I guess a lot of anticipation going into this week. Chandler, we look forward to seeing you back here again next week. And yeah, enjoy the game this weekend, everybody. Chandler, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Nick.